20 years ago this summer, Washington, D.C. was being rocked by the Monica Lewinsky scandal, a sex scandal involving then U.S. President Bill Clinton and a 22-year-old White House intern. Over the years, Bill Clinton has emerged from the scandal relatively unscathed. And would it be any different today? Kimberly Manning is with the Simone de Beauvoir Institute at Concordia University, and welcome. You know, it was really interesting because we were sort of talking off camera yesterday a bit about it. It's all about power, isn't it? And whether we like it or not, even to this day, power is associated with sexuality, with male dominance, with power. In the case of Monica Lewinsky, she said, it was consensual. I wanted to be with him. And yet, he was the most powerful man on earth. She was a 22-year-old intern, right?
And I think that's what's really come through in the last few months, in particular in Monica Lewinsky's article that she published, I think 2 or 3 months ago, where she acknowledged her age, the difference in power between herself and the president at that time, and I think was really suggesting that there was something very unacceptable about what was happening at that time. But when she was 22, she had little capacity for understanding what was going wrong in that situation.
And, you know, when I said in my introduction that he did emerge relatively unscathed, I mean, yes, people still do talk about it, but his impeachment proceedings were about the fact that he lied, that he perjured himself, not about the sex.
Right. And not about the power difference between the two of them. In fact, the story continued to go elsewhere about this young girl with the president. There were stories about the sexuality and targeting Monica Lewinsky in particular. But what wasn't talked about was that drastic power imbalance and what happens when somebody in that kind of position, the president of the United States, seeks to begin a sexual relationship with a young intern. And as she said, it was her first job out of college.
The thing that's also interesting about the Clinton-Lewinsky story is it was the first time where there was an actual public process as a result of the act. Because when you look back in history before that, sex scandals and politicians were just really nothing new.
No, absolutely not. And of course, not limited to the United States, right? We've seen this for hundreds of years, but including and especially in the United States with the Kennedy administration, with the Johnson administration. These are presidents who had extracurricular affairs, often with women younger than themselves. So this was nothing new, but what was new was that President Clinton was asked to account, not for having been with the younger woman, as you noted, but for having lied. So it was kind of a half step. And I think that's part of the concern that some of the folks in the Me Too movement are raising now, and that is President Clinton was never really called to account for the fact that there had been a form of sexual misconduct in that instance.
And the aspect of power plays so strongly. You know, the first documented case of a president, a U.S. president, having an affair was Thomas Jefferson, and it was with his slave. Now, if there is ever a power imbalance, it would be the U.S. president and the slave, right? Sally Hemings. What was it, though, even with John F. Kennedy, who was known to have this sort of it was nothing new, and it was a repeated series of affairs that he had. What was the difference then? Was it because there were fewer women in politics in the press corps? What do you think?
Yeah, so on the one hand, you have an extremely masculine work and decision-making power space that is politics, at which time in the 1960s there were very, very few women. So that's part of it. But I think there was also the larger cultural milieu, right? That in fact, at that time, particularly men, professionals working, whether they're lawyers or doctors, this is part of the privilege of undertaking that work, is being able to have access to your secretary or to other young women who might be working with you.
But also very quickly, because we're almost out of time. You know, we have the Me Too movement. There's all this sort of more awareness about it. And yet Donald Trump has been repeatedly accused.
Right.
And yet there doesn't seem to be much consequence at this point.
No, though I would remind you, though, that, after Donald Trump was elected, we saw the largest march in U.S. history take place the day after his inauguration. So, and the women who came wearing their pink hats, right, that was a direct condemnation of the president in that moment. So, yes, I agree with you. Donald Trump is getting away with all kinds of things right now that no other president in history has been able to get away with. That being said, we are still only at the beginning of this movement, and I mean, it's one of the reasons why I myself am entering politics, because it's an important moment, and we need to have strong feminist voices at the table to try and ensure that movements like Me Too really take shape in policy.
Okay, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you so much.